Welcome once again to the Brownstone, Wolfe's sanctuary of logic, orchids, and murder. Do tell us where in the world you're listening from, and don't hesitate to share your thoughts. If you enjoy these cases, consider liking and subscribing. Now then, shall we begin? Nero Wolfe and the shadows over Montevideo harbour. The envelope was cream-coloured, thick, and sealed with a type of adhesive I hadn't seen since before the war. The kind that didn't give under a thumbnail and suggested European stationery. It arrived at 11:40 by hand, delivered by a runner who didn't say a word, just tipped his cap and left. The man wasn't familiar, and I've got a fair memory for faces, especially when they lean toward trouble. I set the thing on my desk, looked at it for half a minute, then walked it into the office. Wolfe sat in the yellow chair, of course. It was his second beer, the orchid room behind him, his expression passive and unreadable. The room smelled of polish and warm upholstery. The red guest chairs were vacant. Fritz had just retreated after announcing lunch would be served at 1:30, which gave us some time. I held out the envelope. "From?" Wolfe asked, without lifting his gaze from a small volume on pre-Incan ceremonial vessels. "Unknown courier. No card. No return address. No fragrance. Sealed like a secret." Wolfe grunted. He did not extend his hand. That was my cue. I opened it, careful not to tear the flap. Inside was a single black and white photograph, unmarked, with a matte finish and slightly warped edges. I held it to the light and examined it. A dock, wooden beams slanting out over water, a freighter mid-frame, no name visible. Longshoremen mid-motion caught in grainy silver, and in the distance, barely visible but distinct, a man standing at the end of the jetty, back turned, one hand resting on a bollard. I flipped it over. Blank. Wolfe spoke. "Show it to me." I passed it across the desk. He took his time. 30 seconds at least. Then, "Harbour?" "Montevideo," I said. I recognised the ridgeline. "Took a photograph there once, 1942. He gave a faint nod. I went on. "There's a woman coming at noon. Her name's Muriel Santee, widow, said it was urgent." That got him. Wolfe detested appointments made without his consent, but the use of the word widow often delayed his refusal. The doorbell rang, precise and almost musical. I went to answer it, pausing just long enough to adjust my tie. Fritz, of course, remained in the kitchen. When I opened the door, she was already speaking. "I'm Mrs. Santee. I apologise for arriving early." She was tall, probably mid-30s, with a structured wool coat and gloves darker than the air outside. She had an accent you couldn't place unless you danced at the Waldorf. Her hair was pinned tight, no rings on her fingers, not even a widow's band. I stepped aside and gestured her in. The brownstone swallowed her up. She walked like someone who hadn't sat down in hours. I led her into the office. Wolfe didn't rise, of course. He nodded, then motioned to the red chair directly across from him. She didn't flinch, just removed her gloves and folded them neatly in her lap. "I believe someone murdered my husband," she said. No hesitation, no dramatic pause. Wolfe blinked slowly. "When?" he asked. 2 months ago." I leaned against the desk. "Where?" "Montevideo. He drowned. He was said to have slipped from the edge of the dock. It was ruled an accident, a tragic fall." "And you believe otherwise?" Wolfe asked. "Yes," she said, voice steady. "And I have reason to think whoever did it has returned to New York." Wolfe lifted an eyebrow. That was progress. "Please," he said, "elucidate." She glanced at me, then returned her focus to Wolfe. "My husband was in shipping. He and his partner, Jonas Brigham, managed a quiet but lucrative trade between New York and several South American ports. Textiles, grain, and occasionally antiques." "Legitimate antiques?" Wolfe asked. "That depends on the month." He allowed a breath through his nose. I crossed my arms and waited. Brigham returned to New York the day after my husband's funeral. He didn't speak to me. He avoided my letters. He even requested a delay on the estate transfer. "And?" I asked. Her eyes shifted to me. "This morning, Jonas Brigham was found drowned in the Hudson." That earned silence. Wolfe stared at her, unmoving. The room felt denser, though nothing had changed. "Where?" Wolfe asked. "Near Pier 88. I looked at Wolfe. He was already calculating. "Miss Santee," he began. "Mrs." He inclined his head. "Mrs. Santee, your husband's death was investigated by whom?" "Uruguayan police. They made polite inquiries, then they moved on. And Brigham? She shook her head. I only heard from the police this morning. They wanted to know if I'd seen him recently. Wolfe tapped his forefinger against the arm of the chair. What precisely do you want from me? She inhaled carefully. I want to know who is tying up loose ends, and why. I stepped forward. This photo, was it yours? She glanced at it on Wolfe's desk. No, it was mailed to me 3 days ago. No note, no explanation, just the image. Why send it to you? I asked. I think it was a warning. Wolfe turned to me. Archie, what do we know of Brigham? Small office on 42nd, keeps a low profile. Never made headlines. No wife. 1 assistant, possibly 2. Imports under various business names, some legitimate, some shell. Wolfe steepled his fingers. Mrs. Santee, did your husband keep ledgers? She hesitated. Yes. Did you keep them? No, they disappeared the day after he died. Wolfe said nothing. I said, who had access? Only Brigham, and a sailor named Salgado, Miguel Salgado. He worked both ends of the route. You suspect Salgado? Wolfe asked. I suspect everyone, myself included. He almost smiled. I saw it coming. He said, I dislike being compelled. I dislike suspicion dressed as fact, and I particularly dislike unknown quantities arriving uninvited. I gave her credit. She didn't flinch. You will take the case, she said, because this reaches further than you think, and you're the only man in this city with the tools to trace it. Wolfe exhaled. The fee? She reached into her coat and drew out a folded document. A letter of transfer, bank verified, 10,000. Wolfe read it, then handed it to me. I checked the ink, the signature. It passed. He said, Very well. I'll permit the investigation, on condition that you furnish names, manifests, and anything, however trivial, connected to your husband's final weeks. She nodded once. You'll have them by morning. Wolfe rose. That meant the conversation was over. I escorted her to the door. She didn't say goodbye, only nodded once before stepping into the cold. When I returned, Wolfe was already turning to the orchid room. Archie? Yes? Tomorrow, you will visit Brigham's office, with discretion. Of course. And bring me everything they don't want found. I nodded, already reaching for the phone. Wolfe disappeared behind the sliding doors, the scent of orchids trailing behind like faint smoke. Ask ChatGPT Muriel Santee returned at 9:10. She wore the same coat, buttoned high, and a pair of low heels that clicked once across the marble before she paused at the threshold. I opened the office door and showed her in. Wolfe was in the yellow chair, hands steepled, his expression unreadable. The scent of hot milk and polished wood filled the room. The morning sun reached the edge of his desk and stopped just short of her gloves. You may speak freely, Wolfe said. Mr. Goodwin is indispensable. She settled into the red chair opposite him, posture taut. My husband and Jonas Brigham were smugglers, she began. Not the romantic kind, not brandy barrels and contraband cigars. They moved stolen art. Wolfe's eyebrows arched slightly. Go on. Mostly from Europe. Shipments came through South America. Montevideo was the cleanest port. The deals started quietly under the radar. Then they grew. Too large, too risky. Risky for whom? Wolfe asked. For my husband. He wanted out. He said the cargo was becoming cursed. Cursed? I asked. She turned her head. Not superstitious. Dangerous. Brigham had started sourcing pieces from families desperate to escape war zones. Some weren't selling willingly. Wolfe exhaled. Why didn't your husband report him? He had no clean hands left, and no appetite for scandal. He decided to end it quietly. And, Wolfe prompted, he booked a return voyage to New York. That night he died. Wolfe remained motionless. His fingers tapped once, then stopped. You believe Brigham killed him? I believe Brigham ordered it, or allowed it. I asked, who else knew? No one, except perhaps a man named Miguel Salgado. He was an arranger. Is he in New York? Wolfe asked. I don't know, but Brigham was, until yesterday. The room held silence. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. You mentioned a warning. She opened her handbag and handed over a folded slip. Found in my husband's shaving kit, sealed in an envelope. I missed it until this week. I opened it, a receipt, dated 3 days ago. Port Authority, Dock Manifest, Ship Name, Altamira. Brigham's name was listed beside 2 crates marked Archives. I handed it to Wolfe. He examined it without comment. Then he passed it back. Archie. Yes? Discretion for now. Visit the dock, speak to no one official, and see what you can extract from Brigham's office. I nodded. Muriel stood. She looked tired, but it hadn't reached her eyes yet. I'll wait for your call, she said, voice quiet. I walked her to the front door. The street outside was still wet from the morning wash. She stepped into the fog, one gloved hand raised briefly before vanishing behind a passing cab. By 11, I was on West 43rd, across from Brigham's building, a 4-story brick face with a crooked set of blinds on the 3rd floor. I climbed the stairs and knocked once, no answer. I knocked again, then tried the knob. Locked. I waited 5 minutes, then descended and crossed the alley to the rear entrance. The service door was ajar. Inside, the hallway smelled of varnish and old paper. I stepped lightly, following the sound of typing to a door marked J. Brigham Import Office. The door opened to my knock. A woman sat at the desk, mid-20s, hair pinned, lips pale. She didn't smile. Mr. Goodwin? That's right. She looked away, as if disappointed the name matched the face. I'm Lillian Hart. I was Mr. Brigham's secretary. May I come in? She hesitated, then gestured. I stepped inside. The office was small. Filing cabinets lined one wall. A globe sat on a steel pedestal marked with shipping routes in red pencil. A half-packed box of folders sat on the desk behind her. You're packing? I asked. I was told to vacate by Thursday. By whom? A man from the board. I didn't catch his name. I watched her eyes. When did you last see Mr. Brigham? 3 days ago. And before that? She hesitated. He wasn't himself, distracted, nervous. Why? She shook her head. He said something strange. Go on. He said, we all left tracks. They'll follow the wet ones first. I didn't smile. Do you know what the Altamira is? She blinked. It's a freighter, South American routes. Jonas had a cabin aboard it twice last year. Is it docked here now? I don't know. Did he mention a man named Miguel Salgado? Her fingers tensed around a paperclip. Yes, once, after your name came up. That brought me up short. When did he mention me? 2 weeks ago. He asked if I knew anything about you. He said Wolfe would never take the case unless pushed. Did he seem worried? She nodded. Very. I took a slow breath. Do you have his appointment book? She hesitated. It's in the drawer. I waited. She opened it and handed it over. Monday, no entries. Tuesday, 1. Port Authority, 2 p.m. Wednesday, blank. Thursday, dead. I closed the book. Thank you, Miss Hart. She didn't respond. I left without shaking her hand. At Pier 14, the Altamira sat quiet. A rust-coloured hull, paint peeling, the name barely legible. A single dockhand leaned against a crate, smoking. I flashed the badge I keep for just such events. It doesn't say much, but it says enough. Looking for manifest logs, I said. Brigham, crates marked Archives. The man nodded. Left 2 days ago. No one claimed them. Still here? He gestured. Far end. Covered. I walked the length of the pier. 2 crates sat under canvas. Wooden, plain, unmarked. One was open. Inside, shredded packing paper and nothing else. I leaned in. Empty. The second was nailed shut. I didn't open it. I took note of the stamp, CC Holdings, Buenos Aires, and snapped a photo with the miniature in my coat. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe was waiting. He glanced up as I entered. You spoke with Miss Hart? Yes. Brigham feared us before we began. Wolfe closed his eyes briefly. The crates? One emptied, one intact. Nothing declared. Miss Santee's warning, he said slowly, was not premature. He leaned back, the yellow chair groaning softly. This may prove irritating. I poured myself a glass of water, leaned against the bookshelf and waited for the next name to drop. Fritz knocked once, then cracked the door open 3 inches. Miss Verona, he said, softly, with a trace of scepticism Wolfe would later appreciate. I met her at the threshold. She wore a charcoal coat belted tight at the waist and a wide-brimmed hat with a subtle twist of netting. Her complexion was pale, in a way that said she preferred it that way. She held no handbag, which I noticed before she even crossed the threshold. I was told this office assists with discreet matters, she said. We don't advertise, I replied, but we don't hide either. This way. She followed me through the front room, heels silent on the rug, and entered the office as if stepping into a diplomatic salon. Wolfe didn't rise. He glanced once toward the red chair, then at me. Name? Amelia Verona. She seated herself. Wolfe watched her for a full 10 seconds. Daughter of Aldo Verona? She tilted her head faintly. Yes. Wolfe's brows twitched upward. Aldo Verona is a former diplomat with a rather tattered resume. You are his daughter? She answered evenly. I am. Wolfe allowed that to settle. And your concern? A missing friend. Whose name? Wolfe asked. Jonas Brigham. That brought stillness. She didn't flinch, which Wolfe would catalogue carefully. I remained standing, half a step behind her. You believe Mr. Brigham is missing, Wolfe said. He has not answered calls. He missed a meeting with my father. Wolfe's tone was neutral. Brigham was found yesterday, floating in the Hudson. For the first time she faltered. I didn't know. You do now, he said. Her hands folded in her lap precisely. The glove seams were taut at the knuckles. Wolfe asked, Why would your father be meeting with a freight broker? She hesitated. I wasn't told. You find that plausible? Wolfe asked. She nodded. My father has many vestigial contacts. Not all are known to me. And Brigham was one of them? I believe so. My father knew him through embassy circles. Brigham had contacts in South America. And you, Wolfe asked, why come here? I thought he might have come to you first. That would be illogical, Wolfe replied. I did not know he was missing, nor evidently did you. She adjusted her posture slightly. I meant, if something had happened to him, I thought you might hear before the police. Wolfe grunted. You have a habit of attempting to shape cause into effect. That is not advisable, I interjected. Where were you 2 nights ago? She turned to look at me, composed. With my father. And yesterday? I spent the day at the New York Society Library. Can anyone confirm? I'm not certain. I wasn't watching. Wolfe said nothing. Her hands tensed. You think I'm lying? Wolfe raised a finger. No, I think you are selective. Her eyes flicked between us. Then I've wasted your time. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Perhaps, but I'm curious. About what? Why you came here at all? She stood. Because I thought discretion mattered. Clearly I was wrong. She turned but paused at the door. If you change your mind, I'll be at the Langley Arms, room 514. Then she was gone. Wolfe said nothing for 10 seconds, then, Archie. Yes? Follow her. She didn't look back as she left the stoop. Her coat swayed with every step. I waited 30 seconds, then slipped out behind her. She walked 2 blocks south, flagged a cab, and climbed in. I hailed one of my own and gave the driver a low-voiced instruction to follow. We trailed her to the docks. She stepped out at Pier 23, paid her fare, and walked into the mist with the assurance of someone who'd been there before. I watched from a distance. At the far end, beside a stack of wrapped cargo, she met a man. He wore a trilby and a dark coat, tall, with a limp in his right leg. They didn't embrace. She handed him something, too small to see. He looked around once. She didn't. They spoke for 2 minutes. Then she turned and left. He lingered. I followed her only until she was out of sight, then circled back to the man. He had vanished. At 7:30 I was back at the brownstone. Wolfe listened without comment. You saw the exchange? Yes. Description? 40, slender, European, right leg drags a little, wore gloves. Good. He rang for beer. We were halfway through dinner when the phone rang. Fritz answered, frowned, and handed it to me. I put it to my ear. Goodwin. Kramer's voice was grim. Got a stiff. Where? Warehouse. Pier 23. I glanced at Wolfe. Description? Male, white, mid-40s, European coat label, 1 glove, right leg injury, old fracture. I exhaled. Name? No wallet, no prints, and no witnesses. Anything else? He was strangled with silk cord, tight and clean. I lowered the phone slowly. Wolfe didn't speak. I returned to the table and resumed eating. Mr. Kramer, Wolfe said at length, has impeccable timing. Coincidence, I offered. Wolfe didn't answer. He stared at the orchid on the mantel as if it might whisper the next move. Then he said, Miss Verona may not be the daughter of anyone. I set down my fork. She lied? She curated. He poured his beer. The question is, for whom? The morning began with Wolfe demanding a crew list. That meant Port Authority, a phone call to a clerk I once bought 3 whiskies for, and a quiet arrangement involving a brown envelope handed off near a revolving door on South Street. The Altamira had docked 6 days ago. Crew of 29. 2 were signed off in New York and hadn't signed back on. Their names were Antonio Duarte and Miguel Salgado. I brought the list into the office and placed it before Wolfe. Second and third engineer, I said. Signed off within an hour of each other. No forwarding address. Wolfe didn't lift his gaze from the spine of a naval registry. I continued. Duarte was born in Portugal, no priors. But Salgado... Go on, Wolfe said, finally looking up. Interpol file. Charged once in Barcelona, document fraud, never convicted. Is he in New York? Wolfe asked. No record of departure. No hotel listed on the customs manifest. Wolfe sipped from his glass. The orchids had been watered, the window cracked 1/2 inch. A low breeze rolled in off the avenue. 2 men vanish, he said, from a ship tied to the shipment Brigham died over. That's the shape of it. Did they know Brigham? I shrugged. Salgado might have. He signed off within 10 minutes of Brigham's dock entry. Wolfe muttered. Then Salgado was not incidental. I circled the desk and leaned against the window ledge. They're ghosts now. No union report. No police bulletin. They won't surface, Wolfe said, unless we drag them. Just then, Fritz knocked. 2 short, 1 firm. I opened the door. He held a plain white envelope with no markings and a small, deliberate crease down the centre. This was under the front door. I took it, closed the door, and turned it over. No address, no seal. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded twice. The ink was uneven, the hand small and jagged. I read aloud. I saw the ledger. He kept it. Not Brigham, the other one. The name isn't what you think. I handed it to Wolfe. He read it in silence, then looked at me. Anonymous? No signature, no initial, no cent. Wolfe tapped the letter once. It's not Brigham, then. Who? Salgado? Possibly. Or Verona? He didn't respond. I moved to the side table, poured myself a glass of water, and reread the note. The other one, I repeated. We're meant to think that's Brigham's partner. Or someone less obvious, Wolfe replied. I could check the handwriting, I said. See if it matches anything in Brigham's office. You won't find it there. Why not? Because this wasn't written near Brigham. It was written in haste. I sat back down. Why mention a ledger? Because it exists, Wolfe said, and someone wants us to find it, or fail. Trap? Not yet. Bait. I folded the note and slid it into my notebook. Next. Speak with Brigham's shipping clerk, discreetly. Name? Wolfe opened a drawer and removed a typed manifest. Second column, Calvin Dunn. I wrote it down. Wolfe said, and Archie, watch for hands with ink-stained thumbs. By noon, I was at an address near the waterfront, a narrow office wedged between a pawnshop and a barber with 6 years of unpaid rent in the window. The shipping office was dim and smelled of envelope glue and pencil lead. Calvin Dunn was 38, balding, and wore glasses thick enough to see the curvature of time. He looked up from his stool like a man caught amid theft. I'm not supposed to talk to anyone, he said. I'm not just anyone, I replied. He blinked. You work for... Wolfe. And he asked nicely. I don't. He sat back and rubbed his temples. I didn't know Brigham was dead. That's hard to believe. I heard he was missing. I didn't ask. Who told you? A man. No name. Said I shouldn't come in Tuesday. I leaned forward. When did Salgado leave? He adjusted his glasses. Thursday. Brigham signed him off. Gave him an envelope. I didn't ask. You always avoid asking? He nodded. It's safer. What was in the envelope? Money or a name? I waited. He gave in. Salgado asked about a woman, tall, dark coat, accent, said she used to work for customs. Name? Amelia, or Emily, something close. I stood. He looked down. If anyone asks, no one will, I said. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe was waiting. Fritz had just brought in the tray. I summarized. Clark confirmed Salgado was paid off, asked about Amelia. Wolfe nodded. She's not who she says. No, and Salgado isn't either. He opened the envelope again. This, he said, was written by someone who fears both. Then why risk it? Wolfe sipped his beer. Because ledger pages aren't just numbers. They're leverage, insurance. I nodded slowly. Someone thinks we'll protect them. Wolfe didn't answer. Then he said, and they may be right. Asked ChatGPT at 9:15, Wolfe was halfway through his first beer and 3/4 through ignoring the world. The orchids had been fed. The shutters filtered in just enough gold light to catch the edges of his eyebrows. Fritz had placed a folded napkin on the corner of the desk, Wolfe's way of signalling that nothing further should be placed there until summoned. The doorbell rang, once, deliberate. I put my notebook down and stood. Ignore it, Wolfe said. I went anyway. No one rings the bell that way unless they've got a badge, a body, or both. I opened the door. Kramer stood there, coat unbuttoned, fedora in hand. His face said he didn't want to be here. His eyes said he expected to be. Tell me he's not upstairs with a croissant. No, I said, but I can't promise he's glad to see you. He never is. He stepped in, brushing past with the irritation of a man who'd missed a deadline and blamed the calendar. I shut the door behind him and led him down the hall. Wolfe didn't rise. Inspector, he said flatly. Wolfe. Kramer took the red chair on the left and tossed his hat to the floor beside it. He didn't wait for pleasantries. You're in this. I want to know why. That's not a question, Wolfe replied. Kramer grunted. You knew Brigham was dead before I did. You had Archie sniffing around the docks before forensics had pulled the body, and now you're eyeballing Uruguayan photographs like they're road maps to loot. Wolfe said nothing. I leaned on the bookshelf. Kramer continued. You want to know why I'm here. Wolfe lifted an eyebrow. Salgado, he's dead. That earned a reaction. Wolfe's fingers paused above the beer glass. Where? Queens, Kramer said. Dumped behind a sugar mill, strangled. Same method as Pier 23. He leaned forward. Brigham, the stiff you followed last week, gets tossed in the Hudson. Then you get a sailor with a known record and no family, dropped in industrial waste. I said, you're forming a pattern. I've got 2 bodies, 1 dock, and a ledger no one admits exists. Wolfe blinked. Kramer added, you want to tell me what you know? No, Kramer slapped his knee. Then you'd better start telling me what you think. Wolfe's voice was calm. I think you're late by 2 bodies and early by 1 truth. Kramer exhaled through his nose. Give me a reason not to drag Goodwin downtown and sweat him. He sweats easily, Wolfe said. But the heat dries nothing. I smirked. Kramer didn't. Wolfe continued. Inspector, you believe this is about money. Isn't it? No. Then what? History, Wolfe said. That gave Kramer pause. What kind of history? The kind that doesn't want daylight. He looked at me. Translate. I crossed my arms. Brigham and Salgado were part of a line. That line runs from Montevideo to Manhattan. Somewhere along it they picked up more than crates. Kramer sat back. You mean art? Stolen, yes. He scratched his cheek. Who else? Someone with knowledge. Someone who knew the manifests. Someone who rewrote the story. Kramer looked at Wolfe. You got a name? Wolfe said, I suspect one. But she lies well. Kramer's eyes narrowed. She? Amelia Verona. He sat forward again. The diplomat's kid? No, Wolfe said. The diplomat's ghost. Kramer chewed that for a moment. She came to you? Wolfe nodded. Claimed concern. Asked about Brigham. Lied through her gloves. And you let her leave? She's useful, Wolfe replied. Kramer stood and began to pace. She's gone underground, changed hotels, no forwarding. We had her on the Langley Arms guest book. Then nothing. Wolfe's voice lowered. Then she's closer than you think. I said, she asked about the ledger. Kramer turned. There is a ledger? Possibly, Wolfe said. We received a note, anonymous. Kramer held out his hand. I passed it to him. He read it twice, then said, This was written by someone running scared. Yes, Wolfe said, but scared of what? That's your job. No, Wolfe said, that's hers. Kramer looked toward the photo on the desk, the one with the dock at Montevideo, a slant of shadows, a single figure standing near the mooring line. That him? We think so. Brigham? No, Wolfe said, the man behind him. Kramer stepped closer. You think he's the killer? No, Wolfe said. I think he's the reason the killer exists. Kramer looked puzzled. Wolfe added, and I think whoever took this photograph knew exactly what it showed. He picked up the photo. Look at the light. I moved closer. Backlit, I said. Wrong time of day, Wolfe said. Impossible shadows. The angle's false. Kramer blinked. You mean it's fake? Altered. Masked. Designed to suggest one thing and hide another. Kramer sat back down slowly. Wolfe folded his hands. The motive isn't money, he said. It's erasure. Kramer nodded once. Then we need to find who wanted to disappear. Wolfe said, start with the manifests, not the ones Brigham filed, the ones from South America. You think there's a duplicate? I think there's a forgery. And the ledger? If it exists, it ties them together. Kramer rubbed his temple. You ever wish you picked another hobby? Wolfe smiled faintly. No. Kramer stood. Keep Archie out of my morgue. I'd prefer that too, I said. He walked to the door, paused, then turned. One more body, Wolfe, and I come back with warrants. Come back with tea, Wolfe said. We're always short. Kramer left. The door clicked shut. Wolfe leaned back. The pace accelerates, he said. Should we keep up? No, Wolfe said. We lead. The photo lay between us on the long table in the Gazette's back room. The overhead bulb hummed. Light pooled onto the glossy surface. Across from me, eyes squinting behind a magnifier, sat Henry Meeks, photo archivist, cynic and friend when it suited him. He leaned back and removed the loop. This isn't a studio print, he said. You can tell by the grain structure. I don't need it framed, I said. I need it traced. He pointed with the butt of a pencil. See that corner, bottom right? There's a watermark. I leaned in. A faint raised curve in the paper. A horseshoe, incomplete. Letters surrounded it, barely visible. Esto DF Press, he read. That's Diario Frontera, Montevideo. Wolfe had guessed right. That was a sentence I didn't say out loud. Frontera had a man down there, Meeks continued. Andres Cordero, half freelancer, half trouble. I only met him once. He wore 3 scarves and smoked cloves. Still working? No, dead, 2 years ago. Car fire. They never found his hands. I looked at the image again. The dock, the freighter, the shadowed man at the end of the jetty. You think Cordero took this? Almost certainly. Then someone had his negatives. That or someone copied them. Meeks pushed back his chair. I'll get the reference card. If it's here, it'll be in drawer 26B. He disappeared into the stacks. I took the photo and held it toward the desk lamp. The shadows on the dock didn't match the reflections on the water. The light source was wrong, stronger from the left, but the ripples shone on the right. Meeks returned with a file folder. Cordero's envelope is checked out. I looked up. To whom? No one. He opened the folder. Last recorded movement was 1946. After that, it just says, pulled for editorial use, no initials. Pulled when? 2 months ago. I didn't like the math. Can you trace it? Meeks shrugged. I can try. There's a number on the inside flap. I stood. Let me guess. Drawer 27A? He smirked. 32. Locked drawer. I'm shocked. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe sat with his arms folded, eyes closed, as if conducting a symphony in silence. The scent of orchids hadn't quite cleared the air. He didn't speak until I set the photo on the desk. Confirmed, I said. Montevideo. Taken by a man named Andres Cordero. Dead now. Car fire. No hands. Wolfe opened his eyes. Brigham didn't take it? No. And it was pulled from the Gazette's archive 2 months ago. No name, no initials, just gone. Then someone in New York wanted that image seen, or believed. And they altered it, I added. Evidence? The shadows. They contradict the water. It was retouched. Wolfe tapped his fingers once. Motivation? I sat down. Whoever sent it wanted us to believe Brigham was the last man standing, that he was there alone. Wolfe leaned forward. But he wasn't. No. And the person at the end of the jetty? Unidentified. Wolfe poured beer into a tall glass with deliberate calm. Then we must acquire the negatives. Already gone. He took a sip. Then we acquire what replaced them. He rose, stepped to the bookshelf behind him, and retrieved a slim index, his personal copy of Press Logistics, filed by continent. He skimmed until he found the line he wanted. Frontera's New York bureau used to store overflow reels with a local archive. Harper and Stillman. That's in the Bronx. Yes, and closed. I didn't move. Then who holds their material? The Gazette absorbed it in 1947. I stood. Back I go. Wolfe handed me a slip of paper, the negative code, 9 chord 13, written on the inner sleeve, Andres's signature reel. By late afternoon, I was in the Gazette's sub-basement, arguing with a filing clerk named Mabel, who thought film stock was more sacred than state secrets. I showed her the Wolfe authorization letter, signed, stamped, and bearing a fresh ink smudge from the orchid ledger. She gave in. Drawer 32 held 9 reels from the Frontera collection. One was labelled Chord 13. I took it to the viewing room. Dust rose from the plastic sleeve as I unspooled the reel. The negatives were dense, dark, and hard to read. But 10 frames in I found it. The harbour, the dock, the freighter. And this time, 2 figures, one at the end of the dock, and one halfway down holding something under their arm. A briefcase. The briefcase had an emblem. I froze the reel and squinted. A circular mark, letters around it. VRAF. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe was already waiting with a fresh beer and a new orchid beside him. He didn't ask. He just gestured. I slid the print onto the desk. He peered, then nodded once. The original. Yes. And doctored by removing this man. I tapped the second figure. Yes, probably to hide the handoff. Handoff? He carried a briefcase, monogrammed, government issue. Letters? VRAF. Wolfe's brows arched. Verona. RAF? Wolfe's voice was quiet. Royal Air Freight. We both sat in silence. That's British. Yes. Wolfe closed his eyes. Then the ledger crossed borders. And the reason for the killings? Not exposure, retrieval. He opened a drawer and removed a fresh sheet of paper. Write to the War Office. Ask for a list of Verona's contracts with RAF between 1945 and 1947. You think they'll answer? No. Then why write? To alert them, we know. He signed the bottom with a fountain pen so deliberate it seemed like punctuation for the entire case. I stood and reached for my coat. Wolfe didn't look up. Where now? Back to the Gazette. I want to know who accessed the archive 2 months ago. Wolfe said nothing. I paused at the door. Should I take a camera? He finally looked up. No, take gloves. The light outside was fading. A harbour light glowed in my memory. And somewhere in that frame, a ledger still hadn't been accounted for. I was back at the Gazette's sub-basement, where the damp always smelled like paste and forgotten ink. Mabel, the filing clerk with the expression of a bored librarian and the memory of a hung jury, sat hunched behind her desk, like she'd been welded to it. I slid the access card across. Chord 13 is gone. She didn't blink. You pulled it yesterday. Negative. I pulled a copy from a second reel. I need the original negatives. Sleeved in glassine. They were signed out 2 months ago. Her fingers hovered over a metal-bound ledger. Name on file, I added. I'll take initials. She opened the book slowly. Her index finger slid across the column. Signed out by Mr. Verona. I felt it first in the stomach, like the pause between hearing the shot and smelling the powder. Mr.? That's what it says. She turned the ledger. Verona. Neat. Angled. Deliberate. Did you see this person? I wasn't on shift. Who was? Gleason. He's gone now. Joined the Navy. That fit the year. I leaned on the desk. Any return signature? No. Any surveillance? She laughed once sharply. We don't monitor paper. I nodded, thanked her, left. By the time I reached 79th, the air had thickened with spring moisture, and the trees along the avenue held their breath like something was waiting. Inside the brownstone, Fritz was wiping down the wood trim along the baseboards. A pan of something lemon-scented steamed from the kitchen. He looked up. There was a call, he said. Wolfe wants you in the office. I set my hat down. Wolfe was in the yellow chair. A photograph rested on his lap like a religious document. He glanced up as I entered. "You're late." I had to confirm the worst. His eyes sharpened. "They're gone?" "Gone. Checked out by someone using the name Verona. First name? Just Mr." Wolfe's face did not change, but the shift was there, a slight contraction of the jaw. "That confirms it," he said. "I agree." He placed the photo on the desk. "Where is she?" "Unknown. Langley Arms said she vacated 3 nights ago." He tapped the envelope on the corner of the desk. "She's erasing the trail." I moved to speak, but the phone rang. I answered. It was Fritz. His voice was not calm. "She collapsed," he said. "Outside, on the sidewalk." "Who?" "Muriel Santee." I was already moving. I reached the front door in seconds. Fritz had opened it halfway. A woman in a brown coat lay crumpled at the edge of the stairs. Her hat had rolled down the steps. One glove was off. Her skin was pale. I bent down, checked her pulse. Faint, rapid, shallow. "Call the ambulance," I said. "Now." Fritz disappeared. She stirred. Her eyes fluttered. She whispered something, a syllable, not a word. I leaned closer. "Crate," she said. Then again, "Crate, orchids." I followed her gaze to the bottom of the steps. A delivery crate, wooden, about the size of a laundry basket. Stamped, fragile, live plant materials. I lifted it. It was heavier than expected. Inside was straw. Beneath the straw, paper. Beneath the paper, not orchids. Fritz returned. "They're on their way." I nodded. "Help me bring this inside." He took one end. We set it just inside the vestibule. I closed the door. The sound felt final. Wolfe entered the hallway, which was rare. He looked down at the woman, then at the crate. She said orchids. "Yes." He didn't move closer. "Bring the crate to the office." I did. He stood over it. "Don't open it yet." "Why not?" "Poison," he said. "She collapsed within view of the front step. Someone timed it." "Or she timed herself." "That's worse." He circled the crate once. "Open it." I lifted the lid. Inside were 3 small framed items, wrapped in linen. I peeled it back. Paintings, old, oil, dark pigment and cracked varnish. They weren't fakes. One was signed, faint but visible. A Flemish hand. "Wolfe," I said. "These were stolen." He stepped closer. "Yes." "How did she get them?" "She was the last mule." "What?" He looked at me, eyes sharp. "They used her to carry the final shipment." "Why her?" "Because no one would stop a widow carrying flowers." I stared at the crate. "She was the ledger." "No," Wolfe said. "She was the receipt." The bell rang again. This time it was the ambulance. I let them in. They carried her out gently. I watched from the stoop. Her pulse was still there, but something in her expression had faded. A kind of weightlessness, as if she'd surrendered a secret, and with it, the right to keep breathing. Back inside, Wolfe stood before the crate like a bishop before a reliquary. "We keep this locked." "Agreed." He turned to me. "Find Verona." "Which one?" He looked down at the missing glove on the floor. It was embroidered with a crest, royal and old. "The one who signs as Mr.," he said. "Not the one who pretends to be his daughter." The crate sat in the middle of Wolfe's office like a question with no punctuation. The lettering on the outside, live plant materials, handle with care, was faded but official looking. Straw poked from the slats where the lid met the sides. It had been nailed shut, then re-nailed, then sealed again with twine, as if the last person who touched it had wanted it to stay closed long after it reached its destination. I stood beside it with a claw hammer. Wolfe leaned back in the yellow chair, hands steepled across his midsection. His gaze wasn't on me, it was on the space 2 inches above the crate, as if that's where the real threat hovered. "Proceed," he said. I set the claw into the seam, braced my foot, and pulled. The lid groaned, gave a little, then split. Inside, the straw was dense and packed, not the kind Fritz uses for shipping orchids. This stuff was heavy, brittle, grey. I peeled it back. 3 linen bundles, rectangular, each wrapped with deliberate care. I unwrapped the first. Wolfe didn't speak. Oil on canvas, 19th century brushwork. The style was Central European, melancholy and precise. A pale girl in profile holding a glass of water in a marble chamber. Her eyes were dark and the signature in the corner was nearly lost in the varnish. G. Ronsky. I held the second bundle to the light. This one was darker. A seascape, violent tide under copper skies. In the corner, a bronze merchant's vessel riding waves beneath an impossible moon. Signature absent, only a wax seal on the stretcher. The third was smaller, a still life. Silver utensils on a blue cloth, clustered beside an open book. A ring of ash on the rim of a porcelain saucer. The kind of painting that once hung in an estate library while nations fell. Wolfe broke the silence. Turn it over. I flipped the canvas. The name was scrawled in pencil across the top beam of the frame. A. Verona. I let out a low breath. Wolfe reached for the sheet of paper beside him. It held a catalogue list, copied by hand from an Interpol report. He traced his finger down the margin. Stolen from the shilling collection, Vienna, June of '44. He turned to the seascape. This, he said, was from Amsterdam, the Kruzendorp estate, removed under false tax claims, June of '42. He didn't need to check the third. That one hung in the Palais Martinique, Berlin, reported missing after the Soviet advance. I looked again at the girl with the glass of water. These are originals, I said. Yes. And valuable? Beyond price, especially now. I stood. You think Muriel Santee knew what she was carrying? I think she knew enough to say orchids, and not ask more. I folded back the linen. And Brigham? He was the curator, the organizer. Santee was the carrier. Salgado was the mover. And Verona, the source. No, Wolfe said, the authenticator. I paused. You mean he verified them? He knew what was real, what was forged, what could be sold, and to whom. I crossed the room and poured a glass of water from the pitcher near the window. It tasted metallic, like old newsprint and fear. If that's true, I said, why kill Brigham? Why kill Salgado? Wolfe raised an eyebrow. Because someone wanted to erase the map. And the ledger? It's not a list of shipments, he said. It's a list of hands. I moved to sit. Wolfe rose instead. A rare thing. He stepped to the crate and touched the edge with a single finger, as if it might bite. I've seen this before, he said. Not these paintings. This method. Where? Paris, 1920. A consul's wife. 4 trunks, each labelled as diplomatic mail, each filled with art that had never passed through a gallery. He looked at me. The trafficker was caught. The wife vanished. I said nothing. Wolfe stepped back. Take these to the vault. I bent and rewrapped the paintings carefully. What about the signature? Photograph it, then cover it. I nodded. He sat again. Archie. Yes? We've been played. That's not new. No, but this time the stakes are older than both of us. I hesitated. Do we go to Kramer? Not yet. He won't like that. He never does. The room fell quiet again. I returned with the camera, a Kodak with a fresh roll, took 6 photos of the name. A. Verona, each angle sharper than the last. Wolfe opened the envelope of Muriel Santee's note, the one she'd slipped beneath the orchid pot before she collapsed. I hadn't read it. He hadn't let me. He unfolded it now. It read, I didn't know who else to trust. If I don't make it back to claim the crate, deliver it to Interpol, Vienna office. I couldn't stop them, but maybe someone still can. It wasn't signed. I looked at Wolfe. Still think she was just a mule? Wolfe was quiet for several seconds, then he said, No. I packed the crate for the vault. Wolfe said nothing more. But the yellow chair never creaked as he sat. Not that night. Not once. Dinner was duck à l'orange, Fritz's second attempt at citrus infusion since the turn of spring. Wolfe had complained the previous week that the zest had clung too harshly to the skin. This time the glaze was thinner, better balanced, and Fritz brought it in with the pride of a man confident in his own redemption. Wolfe carved precisely, his gestures neither hurried nor ceremonial. The ritual of food, when unspoiled, gave him visible comfort. We had just begun the third course, crisp roasted carrots with a balsamic glaze, when Fritz reappeared at the dining room threshold, his posture tense and unspeaking. Wolfe raised his eyes slowly. Yes, Fritz? A visitor. Insists it cannot wait. That, Wolfe said, laying down his fork, is not an option. I pushed back from my chair. I'll see what kind of insistence we're talking about. I found the visitor in the front room, standing in a hesitant crescent of light beneath the hall sconce. He was young, maybe 23, 24, with the kind of thin build that suggested recent meals had been irregular. His coat was good, but worn. His hair was too neat for the wind outside. And his shoes, well, his shoes were damp. The streets had been dry since noon. "I'm Thomas Verona," he said. "I need to speak to Mr. Wolfe." "He doesn't take walk-ins, Mr. Verona." "It's about my sister." That earned him a pause. "Amelia Verona?" He nodded. I studied his posture. He wasn't rehearsed, but he wasn't raw either. "Wait here." I returned to the dining room. Wolfe was dabbing his lips with a linen napkin, which he folded precisely to his left. "Do you intend to let him linger?" "He says he's Amelia's brother." Wolfe snorted lightly. "Did he provide documentation?" "No, but he's got a coat that costs more than his shoes, which are wet, even though it hasn't rained, and he just said her name without flinching." Wolfe considered that. "Bring him in?" I motioned Verona into the office and gestured to the red chair. He sat stiffly, like a man being called to account. Wolfe, already settled in the yellow armchair, looked him over once, then closed his eyes briefly. "You are Thomas Verona?" "Yes." "You are the brother of Amelia Verona?" "Yes." "You will now explain why your visit couldn't wait until morning." Thomas looked at me, then back to Wolfe. "Because she's in danger." Wolfe opened one eye. "Go on," I said. "She didn't steal those paintings," Thomas said. "She's trying to keep them hidden, for our father." Wolfe interlaced his fingers. "And what, pray, was your father's occupation?" "He was a curator, before the war, in Naples. He catalogued pieces, oversaw shipments. Then the Germans came." Wolfe grunted. "Naturally." "They forced him to organize theft. He did what he had to. After the war, he tried to return what he could, but records were incomplete. Some things, he kept them, not to sell, just to safeguard them." Wolfe's voice was dry. How noble. "He died 2 years ago. Amelia wanted to make it right. She thought we could identify what remained and find their owners, but someone else found out." "And who might that be?" "I don't know, but she's scared. She said if anything happened to her, I should come here." Wolfe regarded him a moment, then turned to me. "Have you verified any of this?" "Nope. But he's wearing damp shoes and left a glove on the front table. There's dried salt on the lining." Wolfe's brow lifted slightly. "Curious." "I checked the forecast," I said. "Tide's been low all evening. No salt on city sidewalks." "Which means?" "Either he was near a river barge or an East River dock." Thomas shifted in his chair. "I took the subway." I glanced at Wolfe. He nodded almost imperceptibly. "Mr. Verona," Wolfe said, "why did your sister come to me?" "Because she trusted you." "A poor reason. She must have had another." Thomas hesitated. "She said you hated lies." Wolfe leaned forward slightly. "And do you?" "Yes." "Then tell me, when did you last see her?" Thomas blinked. "Last night. She came by my apartment." "And?" "She left me a folder. It had old photos, names, addresses from Naples. She said not to open it unless something happened." "Do you still have it?" "Yes." "I shall need it." Thomas shifted again. "I don't know if that's safe." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "Do you presume to judge such matters better than I?" "No, sir. Just, she warned me not to trust easily." That was sound advice. I moved to the corner credenza and retrieved a notepad. "Write the address. I'll go fetch it." Thomas looked uncertain. "It's locked in a cabinet." "Then I'll break it." He scribbled an address in Queens. I pocketed it. "One more question," I said, pausing at the door. "Why come now in the middle of dinner?" "She told me I'd know when it was time." "That's vague." "She called this morning, said someone had been following her. She was crying." Wolfe raised a hand. "Enough. Archie will retrieve the folder. You will wait here." Thomas opened his mouth, then closed it. He leaned back in the red chair, shoulders tight. As I moved past the hall, I glanced at the glove on the table. It was stiff, creased at the palm, with pale white residue lining the inner cuff. I pocketed it. The taxi to Queens was quick. The address led to a brown brick building near Flushing Meadows. His apartment was on the second floor. Neat. Books on maritime law and Italian history lined one wall. The cabinet in question was a locked wooden chest. I used my penknife. Inside, beneath folded linens, was a folder, cream-coloured, no label. I opened it just long enough to see what looked like inventory sheets, names, years, and black and white photographs of canvases. I closed it and returned. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe had returned to his beer. Thomas was sitting upright, eyes watching the floor as though it might shift. I handed Wolfe the folder. He opened it with care, scanning the first page. Thomas stood. Is it what she said? Sit down, Wolfe said, not looking up. I stepped to the bookshelf, retrieved a magnifying glass, and held it as Wolfe leaned in. He pointed to a signature. Here, do you see? I nodded. A. Verona. Not Amelia, Wolfe said. Antonio. Thomas's lips parted. Our father. Yes. Wolfe flipped another page, then another. This is a ledger. Thomas looked baffled. A record of transactions, loans, disappearances. This may implicate dozens of men. I thought it was art records. It is, but not merely ownership. This is evidence. I turned to Thomas. She knew? She said some people would want it destroyed. She was right, I muttered. Wolfe tapped the page again. This signature, it's been added. See the ink. Thomas leaned over. Fresher. Correct. Meaning? Wolfe closed the folder. Meaning your sister may not be the one who retrieved it. I looked at Wolfe. You think someone else got there first? Possibly. Or she gave it to someone. Thomas looked sick. What should I do? Wolfe gestured to the glove. You should begin by explaining that. Thomas looked confused. What? This glove, I said, placing it on the desk. Dried salt. No recent rain. So where were you really before coming here? Thomas's mouth opened, then shut. His eyes dropped to the floor. She asked me to meet someone, he said quietly. Who? She didn't say, just that they'd be near the docks. Wolfe's voice was hard. And you went? Yes. Why? I thought it was about the paintings. Did you give them the folder? No, I didn't bring it. What did they say? They asked if I had it. I said no. Then they left. Wolfe drummed his fingers on the desk. Describe them. Tall, grey coat, foreign accent. Accent? German, maybe Austrian. Wolfe sat back. That's enough, he said. You'll stay here tonight. Thomas blinked. Why? Because I insist. And when Wolfe insisted, there was rarely any safe alternative. Fritz prepared the guest room with silent efficiency. I caught Thomas standing at the bottom of the stairs, unsure whether to follow me or bolt. I gave him the kind of look that ends debates without raising a voice. He went up. Wolfe, meanwhile, had not moved from his chair. He was rereading the ledger pages with that deep, immobile stillness he used when serious thoughts were grinding beneath the surface. I returned to the office. I don't like him. Wolfe looked up. But you believe him? I believe he's Amelia's brother. I believe he was told to come here, but I don't like that he left out the dock meeting until we forced it. Understandable. He's hiding something. Wolfe closed the folder with a slow, deliberate motion. Naturally. I sat. You think she gave him the folder? Wolfe's eyes narrowed. No. No? I believe she hid it, but I also believe Thomas knew where. Then he retrieved it himself. More likely. Someone else did, and substituted it. I blinked. That's not the real folder. Oh, it may be partially real, but see here, the ink on these marginal notes, the order of signatures. Some entries are too modern, too conveniently indexed. So it's a plant. An edited copy, meant to imply one set of facts and conceal another. I frowned. Why bother? Because whoever altered it wanted us to draw the wrong conclusion, but still a credible one. They're giving us a false lead, Wolfe nodded. Clever enough to know what we'd look for, not clever enough to resist showing off. Which means they want us to believe Antonio Verona kept stolen art records for blackmail. Indeed. But you think he didn't? I think he was a meticulous man, and this folder is inconsistent. Pages are too clean, ink's too fresh. So, who made it? That, Wolfe said, is the question, and it may be answered by the salt. I raised an eyebrow. You retrieved the glove. Yep. Did you smell it? No, should I have? He gestured. I fetched the glove and brought it to him. He turned it inside out and held it to his nose. Fish oil. I stepped back. That's not from the river. No, that's from a commercial trawler. Docked? Or moored recently. The salt crust and oil suggest proximity, not contact. So Thomas may have met someone on a boat. Yes, and unless I miss my guess, that boat wasn't in Queens. We sat a while in quiet. The lights from 35th Street fell in amber slices through the Venetian blinds. I heard Fritz closing the kitchen cabinet. Upstairs, faint creaks announced that Thomas had decided to obey the house rules. I leaned forward. You want me to check the docks? No, I want you to find out where Amelia is. Dead? I think not. You think she planted this on purpose? I think she left us a thread. We must pull carefully. I sighed and stood. You think the brother's clean? No, but he's frightened. And frightened men sometimes tell truths even when they mean to lie. I nodded. All right. Archie, I turned. Take gloves. Why? You're going to visit the man who catalogued stolen art in Naples for 3 years. I blinked. Antonio? No, his assistant. You just said he was dead. Antonio, yes, but the assistant, Cosimo Bratta, is very much alive, and according to the archives Amelia gave us, he immigrated to Brooklyn in 1946. And you just happened to spot his name? No, it was typed on the reverse of one of the canvas photos, lower margin, in Italian. I grabbed my coat. What if he's part of the ring? Then wear gloves. It took me 40 minutes to find Bratta's address, a quiet block in Carroll Gardens. The brownstone had flaking shutters and a gate that hadn't seen paint since Roosevelt's second term. I knocked. Nothing. I knocked again. A light shifted behind the curtain, and a man's voice asked something in Italian. Cosimo Bratta, I said. A pause. Then the door opened. He was older than I expected. 70s, maybe, with white hair that had receded in a horseshoe and a moustache yellowed at the tips. He wore a wool cardigan over a shirt that had once been white. Yes? I'm here about Amelia Verona. His eyes flickered. I held up the folder. I don't want trouble, he said. Neither do I. May I come in? He stepped back. I entered a cramped sitting room crowded with old furniture and the smell of lemon polish and old newspapers. Bratta sat. I remained standing. She came here last week, he said. What for? To ask me about a painting. Which? Woman with Cello. Naples, 1942. It was never recovered. And? She said someone was asking questions. She thought it had resurfaced. Did it? No, not to my knowledge, but I told her if it had, it would have been catalogued by Galerien Verein in Vienna. And she left? She asked me to look at some papers, copies. I told her they were partially true. I opened the folder. These? He peered at them. No, hers were older, scanned, faded. These are freshly printed. So these are fake? Embellished. Enough to pass muster, not enough to reveal. Reveal what? He leaned forward. That some of the pieces weren't stolen by the Nazis. They were stolen by the Allies, after the war. Looted the looters? Yes. It was quiet, but it happened. And someone wants that kept buried. More than one someone. I closed the folder. Is she in danger? Yes. Is she alive? Bratta hesitated. Yes. She came again 3 nights ago. She said she was going away. Where? She didn't say. Only that someone had found her father's ledger. This one? He shook his head. No, a real one. Handwritten. In code. My chest tightened. Did she give it to you? No. Did she say who had it? No. I handed him a card. If she contacts you again, call me. Bratta nodded. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe was asleep in the chair. Thomas was gone. I checked the guest room, empty. Checked the front door, locked from inside. I swore under my breath. Fritz appeared in the hallway. Is something wrong? Yes, our guest walked out. Wolfe stirred as I stepped into the office. He's gone. I expected as much. You let him sleep here. He didn't sleep. You think he found something? No, I think he was being followed and he panicked. Left the glove? No, He took it. Wolfe grunted. I handed him the update. He read in silence, then said, Cosimo is correct. These pages are meant to mislead. Which means the real ledger's still out there. Yes. And the only two people who might know where it is, Amelia and Thomas, are now missing. Not quite, I looked up. Wolfe reached into the folder and extracted a photo. Not of a painting, of a woman, early 30s, sharp eyes, standing beside a freighter. He turned it over. The back was labelled in German script, Cable 4, Deck 3. A ship, Wolfe said. She left us a clue. You think she hid it on a boat? No, I think she's on one. I paused. And the photo? A signal. To whom? To anyone who knows German shipping routes, and who might be clever enough to look at dates. He handed me a clipping, a manifest. Cable 4 departs Red Hook Terminal tomorrow morning. I narrowed my eyes. Cargo? Mixed, bound for Madeira. You want me on that dock? Yes, at dawn. You think Thomas will be there? I think whoever took the real ledger will be, or try to be. I looked out the window. Fog was drifting up from the river, wrapping the city in blurred outlines. Should I go alone? Wolfe shook his head. Take Saul. I nodded. And Archie. Yes? Bring gloves. There were only 3 things that could make Nero Wolfe pause during his afternoon beer. Orchids, Fritz's souffle collapsing, or an error in logic. That Tuesday, it was the 3rd. I was at my desk in the office, tapping out the last paragraph of our summary on Muriel Santee's unfortunate collapse. Wolfe sat behind me in the yellow chair, arms folded across his vast chest, the beer untouched. The silence had a kind of weight, like thick wool draped over the room. Archie, he said finally, run through the deaths again. I stopped typing. From the top. Wolfe nodded. Names, cause and dates precisely. I swiveled slightly in my chair. Brigham died on June 12th. Fall down a service stairwell. No witnesses. Next. Amelia Verona's assistant. Strangled. Left in a freight elevator. June 21st. Wolfe's brow lifted. And Miss Santee? Collapsed on our front steps, prussic acid. Fritz nearly fainted. Wolfe gave a curt nod. What links them? They all knew about the paintings. No, Wolfe murmured. Brigham was unaware of the crate's contents. Miss Verona's assistant was in accounts. Santee withheld too much. I leaned back. So what's the thread? Wolfe's fingers tapped once against the armrest. Their deaths occurred days before something else. I waited. A shipment, Wolfe said. Each within 48 hours of a major consignment registered at Epperson and Daly. Every time, an item changed hands. I stood, crossed to the file cabinet, and retrieved the ledger. You're saying someone kills before the exchange, not after. Exactly. I laid the file flat on Wolfe's desk. The scent of stale ink and worn leather drifted up. Then what are they after? Wolfe flipped a page. Control of a list, a record of movement, paintings, artifacts, items with long shadows and inconvenient histories. Something they didn't want anyone else to track. Wolfe pointed a thick finger. Muriel Santee never mentioned a ledger, yet she handled every one of these shipments. You think she hid it? Wolfe's eyes gleamed. Find it. The apartment was untouched. Muriel had been meticulous, even in collapse. Her sitting room was a cathedral of quiet. Velvet curtains, an armchair by the radio, coasters lined up with military precision. I moved carefully, checking drawers, flipping books that might conceal thin slips. Nothing in the closets, nothing under the rugs. The bedroom held more promise. I stood by the dressing table and stared at the oval mirror. A face stared back, mine, unsmiling and patient. Behind me, a painting. It was crooked. I stepped over, lifted it from the wall. Behind it, a safe, flush with the plaster. No dust. I knelt, ran a finger over the dial. Her birth date. I tried it. Then the date of Brigham's fall. Nothing. Then I tried June 21st. Click. Inside, a single ledger. Thin, bound in worn blue leather. No gold embossing, no title. I opened it and frowned. Every page was filled with dates and cryptic notations. T19L read one. Another. F40B via D. Coded. I didn't like coded. I wrapped the book in my handkerchief and tucked it inside my coat. Outside, a light drizzle had started. The sidewalk glistened like mica. I flagged a cab. Wolfe held the ledger like a priest holding an old Bible. His expression didn't change, but I could see something shift behind his eyes. "Excellent," he said quietly. Fritz brought in the tea tray and paused when he saw the book. "Something new, sir." Wolfe waved him off. "That will be all, Fritz." Fritz left, visibly bristling. I sat across from Wolfe, feeling the tension that only came when he was close, painfully close, to something. "You'll decode it?" "I will try," Wolfe said. I leaned forward. "What do you expect to find?" "A list of sins," he murmured, "and perhaps the name of the man who still sins." The silence in the room grew thick. The orchids watched from their shelf in glass silence. "Archie," Wolfe said suddenly. "Yes?" "Call Mr. Kramer." "Kramer?" "He may want to be here when I decipher the price of murder. There are 3 things Nero Wolfe does not tolerate: an empty beer glass, an unscheduled disruption, and a loose end. That morning, all 3 hovered dangerously close. I was at my desk, sorting through the latest batch of photographs, receipts, and scribbled notes from the Brigham Santee affair. Wolfe sat beneath the glow of the orchid lamp, the morning light filtering through the louvers at a pleasing angle. There was no sound but the tapping of keys and the faint burble of Fritz preparing lunch downstairs. Then Wolfe spoke. "Archie, you are certain the shipping dates align precisely with the disappearances?" I looked up. His gaze was narrowed, not at me, but toward the invisible latticework of logic in the air. "They do. Each time someone drops dead, something's been moved. Smuggled, we assumed." "Assumed," he repeated, folding his hands on the desk. "The assumption was that the paintings were the object of value. They were Nazi looted, black market gold. Amelia was knee-deep in it." "Yes," he tapped his fingers together. "But what if the paintings are bait, a disguise?" I stopped typing. "You think they're the diversion?" "I think," he said, "we have misread the motive." He pushed back in his chair. The yellow leather creaked softly beneath his bulk. "Fetch the shipment records." I crossed the office, opened the top drawer of the credenza, and extracted the folder. The labels were meticulous: Brigham, Santee, Verona. I laid them before him. He drew them close, one by one, examining the dates, the destinations, and the customs tags. "The deaths occur," he murmured, "within hours of each recorded departure, yet none of the artwork was intercepted en route." I raised an eyebrow. "So whoever's killing them isn't stopping the shipments?" "Correct." He pointed a thick finger at the second folder. "Muriel Santee. She told us nothing of a ledger." "What ledger?" He leaned back. "Exactly, but there must be one. You cannot operate a multi-year smuggling ring on memory." "She kept it hidden?" "She had reason. You will go to her apartment. She was meticulous, the sort who would hide something in plain sight." 10 minutes later, I was in the Heron Building, 13th floor. The apartment was sealed, though the police hadn't been thorough. The hallway lock was untouched. Fritz had packed gloves in my coat pocket. I used them. The apartment still smelled faintly of Muriel's perfume, a bitter floral tang that clung to velvet cushions and silk curtains. I worked room by room, eyes open for anomalies. The desk yielded nothing but unpaid bills. The kitchen offered only polished copper and cutlery that had never touched flame. Then, in the bedroom, above the headboard, a framed oil painting of a dark sea. Ordinary, except for the mounting. It hung low, too low. The frame was recent. The screws were brass, not antique. I checked the edges. The top corner had a smear of smudged polish, uneven. I pulled gently. The frame gave way with a sigh. Behind it, embedded into the wall, was a small fireproof safe. Modern, discreet. The sort used by art dealers and secretaries who'd learnt the hard way not to trust banks. She hadn't left the code anywhere obvious. But Muriel was not careless. She was vain. And her birthday had been circled on the wall calendar in red. I tried it. 4 digits. Click. Inside was a single item. A ledger. Thin. Cloth-bound, no title, the kind of book that wouldn't draw attention. I slipped it into my coat, closed the safe, and rehung the painting. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe had not moved. He was contemplating the orchid labelled Paphiopedilum Rothschildianum, which Fritz had shifted slightly to accommodate its bloom. I laid the ledger on the desk. He opened it with the delicacy one might use on a sacred text. The pages were filled with codes, not nonsense but deliberate, each shipment labelled by an initial, a location, and a sequence of numbers. "Is that Cyrillic?" I asked. "No," he murmured. "Cantonese, modified. And here, this is Italian shorthand. Fascist-era inventory terms." He turned the page. "Here is our pattern. Every name, every death. It is here." I sat across from him. "So the killer is looking for this, not the paintings." "Yes, the paintings are disposable, but this ledger is evidence. Enough to hang someone?" He gave a thin smile. "Enough to threaten the right people." He closed the book gently, as if not to wake it. "I need silence to think." That was my cue. I headed upstairs, let Wolfe stew in the quiet, and made a phone call to Lon Cohen at the Gazette. I asked if there had been any customs leaks lately. He said there were rumours, especially about shipments rerouted through Lisbon and Casablanca. I thanked him and hung up. By the time I returned, Wolfe had moved the ledger beside his beer glass. "It is not random," he said. "Each name is connected to a shipment, yes, but also to a locale. And the most recent deaths all correspond to crates routed through the Palermo drop." I frowned. So the killer knows the ledger exists, knows it holds the smuggling routes and wants it erased. Precisely. With the people. I crossed my arms. Then why hasn't Amelia Verona been touched? He glanced at me. "She has not vanished. She has gone to ground." "She's next?" "Perhaps. Or perhaps she is complicit." I sat. "We tell Kramer?" He shook his head. "No, not yet. He will seize the ledger and bury it in bureaucracy. This," he tapped the book, "is leverage. We require clarity first." I waited. Wolfe stood. "You will go again, to the harbour. Check today's shipments. There is one marked for the Lisbon route. It will be labelled with the code here." He flipped to a page. P177L. Lisbon crate number 117. "Go, see what's in it." I didn't argue. When Wolfe had that tone, like steel wrapped in velvet, you moved. The harbour was thick with the scent of fish, rust and diesel. I flashed credentials at the foreman and bribed him with a 50 to find the crate. It was there, sealed, nailed, tagged. He pried it open with a crowbar. Inside, ledgers, dozens of them, identical to the one Wolfe held. Not paintings, not money, records. I had them resealed and returned before anyone noticed. Back at the brownstone, I relayed everything. Wolfe's face darkened. "It is worse than I feared. There is more than one ledger, which means someone's still inside the network once the other's gone." "Yes." He rose, moved to the globe by the bookshelf and spun it. "Casablanca, Marseille, Palermo. Each port is not merely a route, it is a witness. Someone there records, someone there dies." He turned back. "We must move faster, or we shall have another corpse before morning." The bell rang. Fritz's footfalls came up the stairs. He entered, nodded and gestured. "A visitor," he said. Wolfe frowned. "Unannounced?" "Yes, Miss Verona." I stepped into the hall. Amelia stood there. Raincoat, gloves, no umbrella. "You're making it worse," she said. "Come in," I replied. She stepped past me, careful, composed. Inside, she faced Wolfe. "I never wanted anyone dead." "No," he said. "You only wanted your father's name preserved." She didn't deny it. "The ledger," she began, "is safe," Wolfe said, "but not for long." She sat. Her hands shook. "My father kept them as insurance, against the people who funded the ring." "And now," Wolfe said, "they want it erased." She nodded. "I ran when I realized. Thomas tried to warn me, but they were watching." "Thomas is a fool," Wolfe said mildly, "but brave." "He's dead?" "No, not yet." Her eyes fluttered. "I'll give you names, but you can't go to the police. They're compromised." "We know." She handed me a slip of paper. 4 names. 2 were underlined. I handed it to Wolfe. He studied it. "Go," he told her. "We will call when it is safe." She hesitated. "You won't let them win?" Wolfe looked at her. His face was grave. "No," he said. She left. He turned to me. "Pack your coat. We are sending you to Lisbon." I blinked. "You're sending me?" "I shall remain here naturally." "Of course." He leaned back. "But Archie, take care. They no longer kill for profit, they kill for silence. I nodded. Then I left. I'd seen Wolfe bait a hook before. It wasn't his favourite pastime, but when the fish was elusive, he'd swish the line in the water with a kind of contemptuous precision that always worked better than it had any right to. The ledger had been placed precisely at the centre of Wolfe's desk. It looked unimpressive. Slim, faded green cover, worn edges, but like the worm in Wolfe's metaphorical stream, it had drawn its share of sharks already. Wolfe had spoken just 2 sentences before retiring to the plant rooms. Tell Lon Cohen, tell Kramer, tell the world I have the ledger, then be silent. And with that, he had climbed the stairs, leaving the trap set. I made the calls. Cohen had grunted something about a Sunday headline. Kramer hadn't said a word, just a breath through his nose, clipped, irritated, and hungry. The evening had dropped a curtain of wet fog over Manhattan. It slid through the windows, softening everything into a smear of shadow and light. I stood near the radiator in the front room, tie loosened, watching the brownstone like a soldier watches a ridge. At 7:40 the bell rang. Fritz didn't move. That was as it should be. I got the door. Thomas Verona stood outside, pale, gloved, tense. He looked like he'd rehearsed something and forgotten all of it just before stepping on stage. He held a flat cap in one hand. His coat was too thin for the weather, and the look in his eyes was one I'd seen on men headed for something they didn't expect to come back from. "I'd like to speak with Mr. Wolfe," he said. "Big night for that," I replied. "Come in." He crossed the threshold slowly, like the air inside might be different. It was. It always was. I led him into the office and gestured to one of the red chairs. He sat stiffly. His eyes took in the ledger on the desk and flicked quickly to me. "I understand you're trying to clear your sister's name," I said, keeping my tone easy. "She's not involved," he said. "None of this was supposed to be about her." "And yet," I said, "there's a body count." He looked down. "I came because I know she didn't want any of this. She wasn't after money. She just wanted to protect something." Wolfe came in at that moment, wiping his fingers on a linen cloth. Fritz trailed behind, carrying Wolfe's beer on a tray with the same care he would give a diplomatic letter. Wolfe eased into his yellow chair. He regarded Thomas with a mild frown, like he'd found an errant sprig among his orchids. "You are Miss Verona's brother," he said flatly. "Yes." "You've come of your own volition?" Thomas's throat worked before he answered. "I have." Wolfe nodded once. "You are here to confess, then?" Thomas blinked. No, I'm not the one you want. I came to tell you that Amelia is no longer in the country," Wolfe finished. "Yes. Your phrasing was weeks ago." Thomas looked startled. Wolfe gestured to the ledger. "This book is the thread holding your story together, and it's the knife that will cut it." Thomas's hand twitched in his lap. Wolfe took a long sip from his glass and set it down with a deliberate motion. "You see," he said, "the deaths, the visits, the warnings, they are not the frantic violence of someone seeking riches. They are pruning, controlled, timed, tactical." I stepped behind Thomas quietly and watched him stiffen. "She wanted it buried," Thomas said. "My father kept records. He made copies. She didn't want it exposed." "She should have come to me," Wolfe said. "She didn't trust anyone, not after what happened in Lisbon." That was new. Wolfe raised an eyebrow. I moved toward the desk, casually reaching to adjust the blotter. Thomas's body turned an inch, instinctive, defensive. "I take it your father was the one who compiled this," Wolfe said, tapping the ledger. Thomas nodded. "He tracked shipments from Spain, from Vienna, from Marseille. The paintings weren't the thing. They were symbols. What mattered was who signed off." "Names," Wolfe said. "Yes, codes, aliases. But he knew how to match them. Amelia inherited the cross-references. I only knew bits." "And the crate?" I asked. "She sent it. She wanted you involved." That gave me pause. "Why Wolfe?" I asked. "She said, because he was incorruptible." I glanced at Wolfe. He looked neither flattered nor offended, just still. At that moment, the front door opened. That was wrong. I looked at Fritz. His hands had tightened at his sides. He hadn't moved to answer it, which meant I had, which meant someone had used my key. I crossed the office in 3 steps and opened the door into the entry. Kramer stood there, hat low, coat wet, look on his face like he'd bitten something metallic. I stepped aside. "Right on time," Wolfe said without rising. Thomas jerked his head up. "You." Kramer walked into the room and stood behind Thomas, arms folded. "You've been a busy boy," Kramer said. Thomas stood slowly. "I haven't done anything." "Tell that to the man in the river," Kramer said, "and the girl who bled out on Lexington." Thomas's hands went to his sides, palms open. "Amelia didn't want that," he said. "She wanted to disappear. I tried to stop them." "Stop who?" Kramer snapped. Thomas looked at Wolfe. Wolfe didn't blink. "There's a man named Kellner," Thomas said. "My father dealt with him in Palermo. When the war ended, Kellner had contacts in the embassy. He could make things vanish." "What did he want from you?" I asked. "The ledger, or the woman who knew how to use it?" "And Amelia?" "I helped her leave. She didn't want to run, but they were watching. I told her I'd take care of it. I didn't know they'd follow me here." Kramer looked at me. I nodded once. It matched the timeline Amelia had given. Barely. Wolfe turned slightly in his chair. "Mr. Verona," he said, "if you are lying to me, the consequences will not come from me. They will come from the man behind you." Thomas turned. Kramer's face was unreadable. "Tell me," Kramer said. "Where did she go?" Thomas swallowed. "Montevideo," he said. "There's a boatman there. He used to ferry smugglers up the coast. Now he takes ghosts." The room was silent for several seconds. Wolfe lifted the ledger and opened it. He flipped 3 pages, then stopped. With a finger he pointed to a small, curling set of initials beside a cargo code. A.V. Thomas nodded. "Your father signed his work," Wolfe said. "Bravado or carelessness?" "Fear," Thomas replied. "He wanted to be remembered, even if only by one person." Wolfe closed the book. "Inspector," he said, "I trust you will take what you need." Kramer nodded slowly. "I'll want a statement," he said to Thomas. "I'll give it," Thomas said, "but I need something first." Wolfe stared at him. "I need to know she made it." Wolfe's voice was level. "That is no longer your concern." Thomas sat back down. His hands trembled. I watched him, feeling the tremor of something underneath it all that hadn't surfaced yet. Wolfe reached for his bell and pressed it. Fritz entered. Calm. Impeccable. "Fritz," Wolfe said, "see that Mr. Verona is given something warm to drink. Then let Inspector Kramer escort him where he pleases." Fritz nodded and stepped aside. Thomas stood. "Thank you," he said. Wolfe didn't answer. He left with Kramer trailing behind him. When the door shut, I turned to Wolfe. "Do you believe him?" "No." "You think he killed them?" "No." I waited. "He's lying," Wolfe said, "but not about the ledger." I leaned on the desk. "Then what?" "He said Amelia left weeks ago." "Right. But he also said she sent the crate." I blinked. "She couldn't have sent it from Montevideo." "Not unless she had help." "She did," Wolfe nodded once. "Archie, tomorrow you will visit the freight company again. Look at the names on the manifest. Cross them with the ledger." "You think Kellner's already here?" "I think Kellner never left." The morning sun filtered weakly through the Venetian blinds, casting pale stripes across Wolfe's yellow chair. The air in the office carried the faint tang of orchid fertilizer and the sharper scent of Fritz's coffee, 2 aromas that, despite their differences, somehow managed to live in harmony here at the brownstone. Wolfe sat unmoving, eyes closed, fingers templed. One would think he was napping, but I knew better. He spoke without opening his eyes. "Archie, the photograph." I handed it over. He took it delicately, as if the image might bruise under the weight of his scrutiny. He tilted it toward the light, brows lowering fractionally. "It's been here the whole time," he said, mocking us. I waited. You never rushed, Wolfe. You didn't tap your foot. You didn't pace. You waited like a gentleman, even if your guts itched to get going. "The shadows," Wolfe murmured. "Observe the crates behind Ms. Emiliana Verona, the direction of the cast, the height." I stepped forward. "You're saying it was taken at the docks?" "Precisely. The early morning sun over the Hudson makes no concessions to deception. This photograph was not taken in Buenos Aires, as she claimed. It was taken last Tuesday." He handed it back to me. "She's been here, in Manhattan, the entire time." That put a rock in my shoe. "But the shipping manifests, the passport copies, fraudulent. She has her father's skill in forgery, likely better." I exhaled through my teeth. "So Thomas is a front." Wolfe gave a slight nod. "A well-crafted distraction, A brother desperate to clear a sister's name, admirable, moving, also conveniently timed. I stepped toward the desk. So the glove? Salt crust, Wolfe said. Sea salt. Not from our local winter roads, but from harbour spray. A morning tide. That glove was dropped deliberately for us to find. I dropped into the red chair across from him. They wanted us sniffing around Verona's name instead of the real issue. Precisely. Wolfe opened a file. And the real issue, Archie, is not theft. It is subversion. The word curled in the air like pipe smoke. She used her father's alias, he continued. Vicente Morales, a name buried deep in the 1920s ledger of illicit trade. That ledger, the very one Muriel hid, documented a system of falsified provenance, fake artworks embedded into legitimate crates, riding on authentic manifests. I frowned. So Amelia used old routes to move stolen works again? Yes, with improvements. This time she masked the transactions with layers of obfuscation. Dead buyers, inherited shipments, forged clearance stamps. It was elegant, brazen. Wolfe's gaze sharpened. But the killings, Archie, they were unnecessary, sloppy. She overreached. Because she thought we wouldn't find her. She didn't expect Thomas to falter. He left the glove. He wept too sincerely. And she didn't know we had the ledger, I said. Wolfe allowed himself a hint of satisfaction. She does now. I leaned back. So now what? Wolfe tapped the edge of his chair arm. Now we wait. The waiting lasted until 7:16 that evening, when a soft buzz sounded from the vestibule bell. Fritz was already on his way upstairs, towel slung over one shoulder, sleeves rolled. The dinner prep would have to wait. I opened the door. Thomas Verona stood there, hat in hand, paler than usual. The collar of his coat was wet. "Mr. Goodwin," he said, I need to speak with Mr. Wolfe." I gave him the kind of look that says, "This is a trap and you know it," but stepped aside. "Take a seat," I said. "Red chair, that one." He obeyed. Wolfe looked at him without standing. "You've come to confess," he said. Thomas blinked. I came to explain." "Which is not the same," Wolfe said. "But proceed." Thomas gripped his hat with both hands. She didn't want anyone hurt. She thought it would be a victimless thing. No one would miss a painting stored for 20 years. No one would notice a shipment rerouted by one dock. Wolfe's tone was flint. And yet 3 men are dead. Thomas looked down. That wasn't her. That was the others. The others, Wolfe echoed. A convenient plural. Archie folded his arms. "Let me guess. You don't know their names?" Thomas didn't look up. "Only faces. They spoke Spanish, not from here." Wolfe leaned slightly forward. "And your sister? Where is she?" "She's gone. South America, weeks ago." Wolfe's voice dropped to a soft knife. "No, Mr. Verona. She was at the docks, Tuesday morning." Thomas's throat clicked as he swallowed. His hands clenched the hat tighter. A few drops of rainwater slid from its brim to the carpet. "I didn't know," he whispered. "She said she had to fix something, that it would be over soon." "She used you," Wolfe said. "You were the human alibi, the distraction, the sympathy." Thomas's eyes filled, then brimmed over. He shook his head. "I'm sorry." From the doorway, another voice said, "So am I." Kramer stepped in, hat in one hand, warrant in the other. "New York Police Department," he said. Thomas didn't resist. He stood slowly, eyes cast downward. "I only wanted to help her," he said. "I thought I was protecting her." Kramer snorted. "You did a lousy job." Wolfe waved a finger. "He won't run. He has nowhere to go." Kramer's mouth twitched. "Doesn't matter. He's coming in. We'll sort it out." I opened the door. Rain hissed on the steps. Thomas walked past me without speaking. When the door clicked shut again, Wolfe finally stood. "She's still here," he said. "We must flush her out." I said, "With what?" He turned to face the orchids. "The truth." The next morning, Wolfe was up earlier than usual. Not by much, but enough to irritate Fritz, who had only just finished laying the breakfast tray when Wolfe summoned me to the office. I was midway through my eggs. "There is no virtue in delay," Wolfe said as I entered. "Get the recorder." I fetched the reel-to-reel and placed it beside his desk. He nodded once. "She is watching," he said, "listening, perhaps through one of her sympathizers. We'll give her something worth reacting to." I glanced at the window. The morning was overcast again. The Manhattan skyline smeared in grey. Wolfe dictated the statement slowly. This morning, I turned over all evidence in the Verona case to the police, including the original Morales ledger. I advise Miss Amelia Verona to surrender herself. The game, as it were, is complete. He clicked the stop lever. That should be sufficient. I blinked. You think she'll come here? I think she must. She cannot flee with the ledger in play. Its existence destabilizes her arrangement. I checked my watch. You want it broadcast? Wolfe tapped the orchid spritzer on his desk. Only once. Noon. WQPR. After that, no more. By 11:48, Fritz had vacuumed the sitting room, dusted the book spines and retreated to the kitchen. Wolfe remained seated, hands folded. By 12:10, nothing. By 1:06, the bell rang. I beat Fritz to the door. She stood there in a charcoal coat, no hat, her dark hair swept low over one eye. Her gloves, both of them, were new. Miss Verona, I said, we were just talking about you. She entered without asking. Her posture was exact, like a statue on the verge of stepping forward. I will speak to Mr. Wolfe, she said. In the office, I said. She crossed the threshold like a woman walking into court. Wolfe did not rise. She sat in the red chair, removing her gloves finger by finger. You're clever, she said. Wolfe looked bored. Not especially. She folded the gloves in her lap. You weren't supposed to find the crate. He raised a brow. No. It was meant to go to a warehouse, destroyed by fire, along with all the others. Wolfe shifted slightly. Why kill them? She looked at the rug. One of them was greedy, one was frightened, one tried to leave. And you? She looked up. I tried to finish it clean. I leaned against the wall. You dropped the glove. Her jaw tensed. He wasn't supposed to go back. Your brother, Wolfe said. He was only ever the distraction, she said, but he cared too much. He wanted to fix it. He didn't know. Wolfe's voice dropped an octave. But you knew, and you planned. She said nothing. Wolfe reached to the side drawer and placed the ledger on the desk. Your father's handwriting on the early pages, yours on the later ones. She looked at it, not with fear, but nostalgia. I tried to make something better than him, she said. You made something bloodier. I tried to end it before it got that far. Wolfe pointed. You were at Pier 6 Tuesday morning. Yes. You wore a wool glove lined in cashmere. Yes. You smuggled 4 paintings beneath crates marked for produce. Yes. I said, what about Muriel? She flinched. She figured it out. She said she'd expose it. I didn't do it. One of the handlers must have. Wolfe closed the file. You've miscalculated, he said. The game ended when you assumed I would overlook the light in a photograph. She smiled faintly. You notice everything. No, he said, but I notice enough. The room was quiet. Rain had started again, faint against the windows. What now? She said. Inspector Kramer is 3 blocks away, Wolfe said. He will arrive in 4 minutes. She looked at me, then back at Wolfe. I don't want to run any more, she said. Then don't, Wolfe said. She rose, placing the gloves back in her coat pocket. I don't expect you to understand why I did it. Wolfe didn't blink. I don't. I opened the door. She stepped out just as Kramer's car pulled up. They met on the front steps. That evening, after the sun dropped behind the brownstone roofs, Wolfe poured a single bottle of beer and didn't speak for several minutes. I said, You going to tell me what really did it? He nodded toward the ledger. The paper stock changed halfway through. He used lined parchment. She used smoothed cotton blend. The ink also varied. Old iron gall versus modern carbon. I shook my head. So the paper gave her away. No, he said. The paper confirmed what I already suspected. From? He looked at the photograph again. Shadows, Archie. Always the shadows. I went to my desk and started the final report. Wolfe sipped once, sighed, and leaned back. All that intelligence, he said, wasted on deceit. Or used to survive, I said. He didn't reply. The orchid lamp glowed softly, and for a long time no one spoke. Kramer left just before dusk. The door shut behind him with the kind of weight that made the hinges groan. Through the window, I watched him herd Thomas into the back of the sedan. Thomas didn't look back. He just sat forward, elbows on knees, hands cuffed in front. His shoulders didn't slump. but they didn't square either. Wolfe stood at the window, arms folded behind his back. He hadn't spoken since Kramer asked where Amelia had gone. Wolfe had simply closed his eyes and said, "I don't know," which was true, or close enough. I let the curtain fall. Fritz passed through with a quiet nod, headed to prepare dinner. The clink of steel against porcelain echoed from the kitchen. I cleared my throat. "You're sure?" Wolfe didn't turn. "She will not be found. Not in this country." "She could be anywhere," I said. "Brazil, Argentina, God knows." Wolfe's voice was flat. "Montevideo." That pulled me up. "Why?" He moved away from the window and back to his desk. "She left it for me, Archie, in the crate's corner, a torn envelope bearing the seal of the Museo Blaines, folded, barely visible." "You think that was intentional?" He sank into the yellow chair with his usual resignation. "I think it was careful. She wished to be known, but only after it ceased to matter." I glanced at the desk. The ledger still lay there, open to the final page. The ink on the last entries had barely dried. "What now?" I asked. He tapped the wood with 2 fingers. "You will package it, wrap it securely, and mail it, anonymously, to the Director of Interpol's Bureau of Stolen Works, Geneva." I raised a brow. "You serious?" "Yes." "No handoff to Kramer?" "Kramer will do what he can," Wolfe said. "But the ledger's implications reach beyond his jurisdiction. Best it be handled internationally." I paused. "You want me to lie?" "I want you to admit." "Same difference." He gave me a look that dried up my commentary. I took the ledger gently. The weight surprised me, denser than I expected. Layers of confession, layered beneath accounts and shipping manifests. "I'll need a name to write on the customs form." Wolfe considered. "Address it from Frederick Delaney. Use a Midtown hotel as a return address. Pick one from the phone directory at random." I nodded and took the file upstairs. By the time I returned, Wolfe had lit a cigar and was rereading a leather-bound volume on the 30 Years' War. He did not look up. I sat at my desk, opened a fresh folder, and typed the first line of the final report. Case file, Verona, final. Outside, traffic began its nightly hum. Inside, Wolfe puffed once and said, "Justice, as ever, limps behind consequence." I paused. "Meaning?" "Meaning the law has Thomas." "And Amelia?" He looked at me. "Amelia has time." I typed a few more lines, stopped and stared at the ribbon. A single word had caught. Montevideo. It blinked in my head. I thought of the glove, of her expression when she looked at Wolfe, as though trying to remember something she hadn't yet forgotten. I thought of Thomas, and how many wrong things he had been willing to say to protect someone who didn't ask him to. "Archie," Wolfe's voice pulled me back. "Yes?" "You may include, if you wish, that the ledger was sealed in wax." I smirked. "Tidy ending." "No," he said, "well packaged." I finished the paragraph, straightened the pages, and turned off the lamp. The report was done, but the story, like the city outside, was still moving. Somewhere across the sea, a woman with dark eyes and clever fingers had just stepped off a boat. She might be walking through a foggy port, or sipping something bitter under the shadow of a colonial clock tower. She was gone, but not lost. And the ledger, at last, was closed. The hallway was dark, but for a strip of low light that spilled from the glass panes of the plant room. I moved quietly, though I didn't need to. Wolfe never turned when he was tending orchids. Inside, the warm air hung thick with humidity and something faintly sweet. The scent of new blooms, maybe, or just the aftertaste of steam from the pipes overhead. Wolfe stood at the far end, hands folded behind his back, inspecting the roots of a vanda he'd once claimed was impossible to coax into bloom before April. It was blooming now. I held up the 2 bottles. "Fritz is asleep," I didn't ask. Wolfe didn't look away from the flower. "You presume he would deny you?" "No," I said, setting the bottles on the bench. "I presume he'd ask why." That earned a grunt. I opened the first bottle and passed it over. Wolfe took it without shifting his stance. The plant room always felt slower than the rest of the house. No footsteps echoed, no phone ever rang in here, just the faint wheeze of moisture vents and the occasional creak of wood under changing heat. I took a seat on the edge of the work table, careful not to disturb the trays. "You going to sleep tonight?" "No," I sipped. "Didn't think so." Wolfe leaned forward, adjusted a single wire hook and stepped back. "I suppose," he said, "you think I should have told Kramer about the glove." "Maybe," I said. "Or maybe he already knew." He glanced over. He did not. I shrugged. "Then maybe you just didn't want to ruin a tidy ending." He grunted again. Then silence. The beer was warm. Outside the glass, the lights of 35th Street flickered through the condensation. "She planned it well," I said. "Yes. And left nothing." "Not quite," Wolfe said, his tone as dry as the leaves in a pressed herbarium. "She left absence. That too is something." I nodded, not replying. Somewhere deep in the brownstone, the phone rang once, long and low. It echoed unanswered across the parquet floors and stopped. Neither of us moved. "You think she'll use her father's name again?" Wolfe shook his head once. "Not necessary. She will find another." "And the ledger." He turned to face me, finally. The bottle in his hand had barely been touched. "Shadows come and go," he said. "But shipping records, those last forever." He walked toward the centre bench and placed the beer down, as if handing off something too cold for his liking. Then he adjusted a lamp with the back of one hand. "The case is closed, Archie." "Yeah," I said. "But it doesn't feel it." "That is because you prefer your endings with noise. This one is better." I looked at the bloom behind him, white with a rim of gold. "Not better," I said, "just quieter." He didn't disagree. I stood, stretched my back, and finished my beer. The bottle gave a low clink as I set it beside his. "You'll be up long?" Wolfe didn't answer. He was already focused again, eyeing a leaf that bent at too sharp an angle. I stepped out and let the door click shut behind me. In the hallway, the darkness had deepened. The phone would ring again in the morning. The world would want answers, or noise, or movement. But for now, it was just midnight, and the orchids were listening.